Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about something that sneaks into your life wearing fuzzy slippers and then proceeds to burn it to the ground: procrastination. But don't worry, this isn't some guilt trip TED Talk or a motivational poster disguised as advice. This is personal. It's real. It's mildly embarrassing. And honestly, you probably won't survive another year of your dreams being quietly replaced by scrolling, sighing, and snack breaks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Now, let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. It was 10:46 a.m., and sunlight was pouring into my room like judgment. That kind of golden, shame-filled light that hits your face when you know you're late for your own life. My alarm had gone off 4 times. I had dismissed each one like a bored emperor rejecting peasant appeals. I didn't even remember falling back asleep. That's the trick about procrastination. It doesn't always start with skipping a task. Sometimes it starts by skipping waking up. I swung my legs off the bed and immediately stepped on something squishy. A protein bar wrapper. The irony was painful. Fuel for a gym session that never happened. I sat there, brain barely rebooting, stomach already bargaining for coffee, and I stared into the middle distance. You know that middle distance. The one where dreams go to wait, like forgotten tabs on your browser. My to-do list sat by the lamp like a quiet dare. 15 unchecked boxes. One of them just said, "Start." I hadn't. At some point, I shuffled to the kitchen. The tiles were cold and judgmental. As I waited for the kettle to boil, I did what any emotionally overwhelmed adult would do. I opened TikTok. One scroll became 7 minutes. 7 minutes became 35. And by the time I looked up, the kettle had gone cold again. So yeah, there I was, already hours behind, and nothing had actually gone wrong. That's the terrifying part. No crisis. No emergency. Just nothing. There's a psychological term for this kind of spiral: acrasia. The ancient Greeks came up with it. It's when you act against your better judgment, even when you know what's right. It means knowing you should write, should move, should call your mom, and not doing it anyway. It's also the most underrated villain in modern life. My brain didn't feel lazy, just tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes. More like emotional tired. The kind where your soul sighs before your body does. I remember thinking, how did this become normal? My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Project due today. Cute. That project had been moved 4 times already. I swiped it away like lint. Now, before you start thinking, wow, this guy's really a mess, let me tell you something weird. I was known as a responsible person. To others, I looked like I had it together. Bills paid. Clients emailed. Dishes mostly done. But behind the curtain, it was chaos. Functional procrastination. I always met deadlines, just barely. Always showed up, just drained. Always looked fine, just not present. And that's the thing no one tells you: procrastination isn't always loud. It's not always Netflix binges and pizza boxes. Sometimes it's invisible. Sometimes it's cleaning the fridge instead of starting your resume. Sometimes it's staring at the wall for 10 minutes and calling it thinking. A study I once read said that procrastination isn't a time management issue, it's an emotion regulation problem. You avoid tasks not because they're hard, but because of how they make you feel. The discomfort. The self-doubt. The fear of being mediocre at something that matters. And that hit me like a bag of bricks shaped like my unfinished novel. There was a sticky note on my wall that said, "Write 500 words today." It had been there for 3 months. I had stopped noticing it. Outside, a bird made the loudest chirp I've ever heard. I glared at it like it was mocking me. That bird had probably built an entire nest this morning while I was Googling what to do when you're stuck. Suddenly, my thoughts spiraled. I imagined my future self, still stuck. Still behind. Still tired. That version of me wasn't someone I wanted to meet. So I did something radical. I didn't open another app. I didn't make another coffee. I just walked to my desk, sat down, and stared at the blinking cursor on a white screen. It blinked. I blinked. Then, for no reason, I typed one sentence. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here. And weirdly, that felt like a victory. That blinking cursor? That was the first moment of resistance breaking. Like the tiny crack in a frozen lake. It was nothing. But it was not nothing. By the way, fun fact, there's an actual psychological effect called the Zeigarnik effect. It's this thing where our brains remember unfinished tasks better than finished ones. It's why half-done projects haunt you like polite ghosts. But guess what? That same effect can be used against procrastination. Just typing that first weird sentence, tricks your brain into wanting to continue. I didn't know that at the time, though. I just knew I was tired of living inside the parentheses of my own story. So yeah, that morning? It sucked. But it was also the beginning of everything. That was the day I finally admitted that I wasn't lazy. I was scared. And lonely. And strangely smart in all the wrong ways. You'd think the hardest part of beating procrastination would be the planning, or the routines, or the mindset shifts. But it wasn't. It was seeing myself clearly without flinching. And once I did, everything started to change. The biggest lie I ever told myself was so small, so quiet, it barely registered. It didn't come wrapped in neon regret or existential dread. It just whispered, "I'll do it tomorrow." That was it. A sentence so simple it sounded almost helpful. Like a friend patting you on the back. "You're tired. It's fine. Tomorrow's a better time anyway." The problem was, tomorrow had terrible follow-through. You see, the human brain is an oddly optimistic thing. There's this phenomenon called the planning fallacy, and it basically means we always think we'll have more time, more energy, more willpower than we actually do. I mean, I was convinced that future me was this incredible productivity god. Future me would wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, drink green juice, and finally write that business plan, finish that course, and reorganize the closet. Too bad present me was a mess who thought brushing my teeth was an accomplishment. There was a moment, not too long ago, when I opened my notebook and flipped through a month of tomorrows. All these big plans, highlighted and underlined, moved from one day to the next like a sad game of calendar hopscotch. I had perfected the art of looking productive without ever really being productive. The worst part? I believed myself every time. That's the sneaky thing about this lie. It wears the costume of hope. It feels like self-compassion, but it's actually self-abandonment. You ever had that weird moment when you realize you're lying to yourself out loud? Like you actually say, "Oh, I'll do that tonight," and immediately feel a little sick, because you know you won't? It's a special kind of betrayal. Micro, but corrosive. And still, I kept doing it. Because here's the academic debate. Is procrastination a behavior or a belief system? Some researchers say it's all about delay tactics. Others argue it's baked into our identity, an internalized sense of incapability that gets reinforced every time we put something off. I lean toward the latter. Because I didn't just procrastinate. I identified as someone who never finished things. That was my inner monologue on loop. You're the kind of person who starts and fizzles. And once that narrative sets in, it becomes harder to break than a vending machine with your snack stuck in the coils. I remember a time when I was supposed to send a pitch email. Just one email. I had the draft done and everything. But I waited. Why? Because I imagined them reading it, frowning, laughing at how underwhelming it was. I imagined being ignored. Rejected. Or worse, accepted, and then expected to deliver. That's the thing no one tells you. Procrastination isn't just fear of failure. It's also fear of success. Because success comes with stakes. Expectations. The chance to mess up again. So instead of pressing send, I opened Instagram. Scrolled. Compared. Sank. By the time I looked up, the window of action had closed. like one of those old trains where the doors seal and you just stare at the conductor as they pull away. Odd fact of the day: there's a species of jellyfish that never dies, it just resets its life cycle when under stress. It literally turns into a baby jellyfish and starts over. I envied that jellyfish. I wished I could hit reset. Go back to when I believed in myself a little more. Back before I let myself down so often that I started avoiding my own reflection. And you know what? I don't think I was lazy. I was just emotionally exhausted from the invisible math I did every day. You know that math, right? If I start now, I'll only get 20 minutes in before dinner. If I wait until 9 p.m., I'll be more focused. If I do this task, then I have to face the one I'm really dreading. Mental calculus worthy of a physics major, all just to not do the thing. At some point, it becomes normal. Not comfortable, just familiar. You stop questioning it. You develop coping systems. Like making overly detailed to-do lists, which are actually just distraction rituals in disguise. You color code things you're never going to touch. You schedule creative focus blocks, and then use them to clean your email inbox. I once spent 2 hours organizing my bookmarks folder. That folder has not been opened since. Let me be real, every time I broke a promise to myself, something inside cracked. That "I've got this" feeling? Gone. And that's why procrastination feels so heavy. It's not the task, it's the shame you carry around for not showing up. I remember standing in line at the grocery store, staring at a wall of energy drinks, and thinking, maybe the problem is just that I'm tired. That's what the commercials say, right? Power through. Hustle. Grind. But what if the problem wasn't energy? What if the problem was avoidance masked as rest? That realization hit me harder than a Red Bull. So that night, I did something wild. I didn't say, "I'll do it tomorrow." I said, "I'll do it for 5 minutes right now." And I did. Just 5 minutes of focused work. No timer. No plan. Just motion. It wasn't magic. I didn't turn into Elon Musk or Marie Kondo overnight. But when I went to bed, I felt different. Not proud, exactly, just aligned. Like my actions and my values were finally holding hands again. Human intelligence fact? The prefrontal cortex, the decision-making hub of your brain, is especially sensitive to perceived control. Even the illusion of agency, like choosing when to do something, can reduce anxiety and increase follow-through. That's what those 5 minutes gave me. A tiny win. A spark. And slowly, over time, I started trading. "I'll do it tomorrow." For "I'll do a little right now." No pressure. No drama. Just presence. The next morning, I woke up. Same light pouring through the blinds. Same list waiting by the lamp. But this time, I didn't lie to myself. This time I whispered, "Let's just start." There's a specific type of despair that hits when you're 4 sips into your coffee and still feel like you're stuck in molasses. Not emotionally. Physically. Like your limbs are coated in that psychic goo that makes even opening a Google Doc feel like pushing a piano uphill. That's what I was feeling the morning coffee stopped working. Not just one coffee, by the way. We're talking a double shot, borderline espresso abomination brewed with more desperation than care. I was clutching the mug like it was some ancient relic, like maybe if I sipped it just right, the will to live, okay, maybe just the will to write an email, would suddenly awaken. But nothing. Just that weird jittery feeling where your body is vibrating and your brain is asleep in the back seat. See, for a long time, I thought my problem was energy. Not enough of it. So I hacked. Coffee. Matcha. L-theanine. Power naps. Blue light glasses. Every time I bought something new, it came with the quiet hope, this will fix me. It didn't. Turns out, the issue wasn't low energy. It was decision fatigue. A very real phenomenon where your brain, after making too many choices, basically just throws its hands up and goes, "You know what? You figure it out, I'm going offline." Every small choice chipped away at my bandwidth. What to eat, what to wear, whether I had time to do the big task, whether that task even mattered anymore. Until even thinking about opening my laptop made me feel like I was trying to lift it with my eyelids. What's ironic is this: the smarter someone is, the more likely they are to overthink. Their minds are wired to explore every angle, every possible outcome. But that same gift can become a weight, draining their energy and stalling their momentum. That was me. Always thinking. Rarely moving. The worst part? I'd sit there in front of my screen, mind spiraling, and then berate myself for not doing anything. As if yelling at a tired horse makes it gallop. There's a phrase I once read in a psychology textbook that never left me: ego depletion. It's the idea that willpower is a limited resource, and once it's drained, good luck getting anything productive done. That explains the paradox. I'd waste my mental energy on avoiding the task, then feel too drained to do the task, and end up resenting myself for the whole mess. Let's break it down like a sleep-deprived coach. 1. Avoidance burns fuel. 2. Stress burns more fuel. 3. Guilt burns what's left. 4. Now you're tired before you even start. I used to think I was just bad at mornings. Or bad at afternoons. Or bad at working under pressure. But the truth? I was stuck in a loop of trying to push through without ever asking if the system itself was broken. You ever tried to fix a leak by tightening the faucet, when the actual problem is a burst pipe underground? Yeah. That was me. Here's the odd fact of the day: in Japan, there's a term called karoshi. It literally means death from overwork. A real medical diagnosis. It's the extreme end of the productivity spectrum, sure, but still a flashing warning sign that the culture of doing more faster harder can destroy even the most well-intentioned among us. And I wasn't even productive. I was just drowning in intention. Eventually, I stopped trying to feel motivated. I realized that waiting to feel like doing something was the ultimate trap. Because I almost never did. So one day, completely exhausted, over-caffeinated, and underaccomplished, I tried something embarrassingly simple. I asked myself, what's the next tiniest action I can take that doesn't feel horrible? That's it. No fancy life hack. No morning ritual playlist. Just one question. And that day, the answer was: open the file. Not write the proposal. Not edit the draft. Just open the file. I did. And then I blinked. Sat there. Breathed. And without realizing it, I had started typing. The hardest part was behind me. Academic debate moment. Some researchers argue that action precedes emotion, that by starting, we generate the energy we need. Others say we need an emotional shift first: calm, clarity, confidence. I used to be in the second camp. Now, I think both are right. But the starter fuel? That's usually action. Tiny, non-intimidating, embarrassingly doable action. It's like lighting a match instead of trying to build a bonfire from scratch. And yeah, I know it sounds obvious. But you'd be amazed how many people wait to feel a big, meaningful surge of momentum when really they just need to click the icon and let the rest unfold. From that day, I stopped treating coffee as my savior. It wasn't the lack of caffeine. It was the mental static. The internal noise saying, "You're behind, you should be doing more, why haven't you finished that yet?" I started drinking coffee after doing something tiny. Not before. That's when coffee became a reward, not a crutch. A well done instead of a please help. Also, I added something new to my mornings: a decision diet. Fewer early choices. No app opening roulette. Same breakfast. Same playlist. One notebook, one pen. Each predictable element bought me just enough clarity to take one real step toward the work that mattered. Momentum isn't built from motivation, it's built from predictability. From removing friction. From designing a space where thinking less helps you do more. I still drink coffee. Still love the smell, the ritual. But now I know that no amount of roasted bean juice will fix a broken workflow. That energy isn't the root cause, it's the visible symptom of a deeper block. Now, when I feel the fog settling in, I don't fight it with more effort. I zoom in. I ask, what's the next non-scary thing I can do for 2 minutes? Usually, it's something so small it feels stupid. That's how I know it's right. It was 2:47 a.m. when I cracked. Not dramatically. Not with tears or yelling. Just me, alone in a dark room, staring at a screen that refused to blink first. You ever sit in silence so thick it feels like the walls are watching you? That was the vibe. The cursor blinked. I blinked back. Nothing moved. I had this half-finished idea for a pitch. A pitch I should have written a week ago. A pitch that had now ballooned into a monument of self-loathing and imaginary judgment. It's funny how the longer you avoid something, the more power it gets. What started as a simple task had turned into a hydra-headed monster of perfectionism, fear, and paralyzing expectations. So I sat there. Pale light from the screen casting my tired face into something halfway between a ghost and an underpaid crypt keeper. And then it hit me, this wasn't just about the pitch. This was about every single moment I'd ever delayed something I cared about. Every note I left unsent. Every idea I shelved for later. Every story I never told because I wanted it to be perfect. Spoiler, perfect never showed up. That night, something in me cracked, but in the best possible way. Like breaking a seal that had been holding in a lifetime of excuses. I whispered out loud, I'm tired of being scared. And I meant it. Now don't get me wrong, I was still scared. But I was more tired of being scared than I was scared itself. And that's a very specific, very powerful turning point. It doesn't come with fireworks or a glow-up. Just a quiet shift. A new weight to the voice inside that says, try anyway. I opened a fresh doc and typed the dumbest sentence I could think of. Dear human with money, here's my pitch. Don't judge. I laughed. For real. A short, punchy exhale that made me feel, dare I say it, alive. The kind of laugh you give when you know things are bad, but you're finally done pretending they're not. I kept typing. Not well. Not fast. But I typed. 10 minutes. Then 20. I didn't hit send that night. I didn't finish anything. But I broke the seal. I showed up. I bled a little on the keyboard. I fought the beast by making it look stupid. The brain processes emotional pain through the same neural networks as physical pain. That's why rejection, shame, and failure actually hurt. Like hurt. It's not drama, it's biology. That's also why we avoid so much. Not because the task is hard, but because the possibility of emotional pain is scarier than a root canal performed by an angry raccoon. But here's the twist. When you voluntarily face that emotional discomfort, on your terms, it actually builds resilience. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, say that 5 times fast, lights up when we choose to engage, rather than avoid. It's like a mental gym rep, unsexy, but vital. I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was that doing something small, something dumb, something human, shrunk the monster. That blank screen? It wasn't a judgmental void anymore. It was a playground. I kept writing nonsense until 3:16 a.m. Somewhere in there, I started writing the actual pitch. Somewhere in there, I stopped hating myself for being a procrastinator. Because here's the off-topic but highly relevant truth. In 1905, Albert Einstein had what's called his miracle year. He published 4 groundbreaking papers in a single stretch of productivity that changed physics forever. You know what job he had at the time? He was a patent clerk. Not a professor. Not a lab genius. Just a guy reviewing inventions with the kind of boredom that might have driven him to dream differently. That night, I remembered that even geniuses start where they are. With what they have. Probably in their pajamas. And so did I. That 2:47 a.m. breakdown didn't fix me. But it reintroduced me to myself. Not the version that talks a big game in planners and to-do apps. The quiet one. The one that just wants to make something, anything, and not feel like a failure before even starting. There's still open debate in academic circles about whether procrastination is more rooted in anxiety or poor time perception. Is it that we don't want to face discomfort, or that we just can't accurately imagine how long things will take, so we default to delay? Personally, I think it's both. But when I'm up at 2:47 a.m. in a t-shirt that says, "I love naps," the debate doesn't matter. What matters is that I showed up. And you know what else? The next day, I slept in. I ate junk food. I forgot to floss. But I opened the same doc and finished the pitch. And then, gasp, I sent it. No fireworks. No viral tweet. Just a ping in my inbox that said, "Thanks for this, let's chat next week." I stared at that message and realized I almost missed this because I was scared of trying. That was the night I learned a secret most people never figure out. Progress isn't made when you feel ready. It's made when you stop waiting to feel ready. So now, whenever I find myself staring at another scary blank screen, I remember that moment. That dumb first sentence. That blurry-eyed, coffee-stained refusal to quit before starting. And sometimes I still whisper, "Don't judge." Just to make myself laugh. Just to feel human. Just to begin. I was elbow deep in a Wikipedia spiral, "Don't judge," reading about Greek philosophy when I found something that made me stop mid-scroll. It was a term from Aristotle, akrasia. I already mentioned it once, but that night I dove deeper. Akrasia, in essence, is the state of acting against your better judgment. Knowing what you should do, wanting to do it, and yet doing something else entirely. Sound familiar? To Aristotle, it wasn't laziness. It was weakness of will. He believed that knowledge didn't always translate to action, not because we were flawed beyond hope, but because reason and desire are not always aligned. Sometimes your mind says, "Do it," and your emotions say, "Nah." And let's be honest, "nah" is a very persuasive argument at 10:17 p.m. with snacks nearby. This discovery felt both comforting and slightly insulting. On one hand, it meant I wasn't broken. I was just human, like every toga-wearing philosopher thousands of years ago. On the other hand, it meant the problem was ancient, which strongly suggested there was no quick fix. Still, something clicked for me that night. I realized I'd been fighting procrastination like it was a modern problem, something to be solved with apps, alarm clocks, or guilt. But maybe, just maybe, it was something older. Deeper. Less of a scheduling glitch and more of a spiritual resistance. So I leaned into that. I started treating procrastination less like a malfunction and more like a mismatch between intention and incentive. My brain wanted safety. My goals wanted risk. No wonder I was stuck. Here's the human intelligence fact for this round: the brain values immediate rewards over delayed ones. It's called temporal discounting. If I offer you $5 now or $10 in a week, most people take the $5. Because the now feels real, and the later feels like a sketchy promise. That's exactly how procrastination works. Your future dream, write a book, launch a business, go to the gym, is $10 in a week. Watching another YouTube video? That's $5 right now. Sweet, salty, bite-sized validation. So how do you beat the brain at its own game? You gamify the now. That's what the Greeks didn't have, reward systems. But I do. I've got dopamine, baby, and I'm not afraid to use it. I started tricking my brain with instant gratification loops that served my long-term goals. Every time I sat down to write, even for 5 minutes, I'd reward myself. Not with pizza or champagne or anything dramatic. Sometimes it was a silly sticker in my journal. Sometimes it was 10 guilt-free minutes of scrolling. The point was, I made starting feel good. Eventually, I stopped needing the rewards. The habit began feeding itself. But in the beginning? That sticker was the reason I typed my first paragraph some nights. Odd fact of the day: pigeons have been shown to prefer predictable, small rewards over larger ones with uncertainty. In other words, even birds will pick a sure mini-win over a maybe big later. And yet we judge ourselves for acting the same way. I don't anymore. Now I embrace it. I also started noticing the moment procrastination showed up. Not the aftermath. Not the guilt. The second I felt that twitch of resistance, the desire to open another tab, get another snack, quickly check something, I'd stop, breathe, and whisper, "Ah, there you are." I stopped fighting it and started acknowledging it. Like bumping into an old frenemy at the grocery store. You don't punch them, you nod and keep walking. This changed everything. Because what Aristotle didn't have, what none of them had, was the neuroplasticity angle. The knowledge that our brains rewire themselves based on repeated patterns. When you stop rewarding the avoidance behavior, it shrinks. When you reward the start, it strengthens. That's when I built my first rule. Start with one sentence. Always. Doesn't matter if it's for an essay, a workout, a difficult conversation. One sentence. That's the cost of entry. Anything after is a bonus. This simple rule became my lighthouse. Not because it always worked, but because it always lowered the pressure. One sentence didn't threaten me. It teased me, enticed me, challenged me gently. Most nights, I'd write far more. But on the days I didn't, that one sentence still meant I showed up. It's important to know this. Habits form by identity reinforcement, not just repetition. Every time I started, even for a moment, I told my brain, I'm the kind of person who tries. That belief? Worth more than any planner, course, or clever app. There's still debate in philosophical circles about whether people are inherently rational or fundamentally desire-driven. Aristotle argued for rationality being at the core of virtue. But modern psychology? It leans toward emotion-first thinking. I say use both. You need the logic to understand the trap. And you need the emotion to climb out of it. So I turned my evenings into a ritual. Not productivity bootcamp. A gentle rhythm. One candle. One playlist. One cup of tea. One deep breath. And one sentence. Every night. No drama. No pressure. Just me, showing up for myself like I wish I had 10 years ago. There's something sacred about that. About beating the ancient enemy with something so small, so quiet, it feels like a secret. And maybe it is. Maybe that's the real anti-procrastination strategy. Show up in ways that make your future self proud, without making your present self miserable. That's what the Greeks never figured out. But I did. In sweatpants. At midnight. With lo-fi beats and cold tea. Somewhere along the way, I realized I had been blaming dopamine for everything. You know the script. Our brains are addicted to instant gratification. Social media hijacks our dopamine pathways. This is why you can't finish a novel. And sure, there's truth in all of that. But the more I learned, the more I realized dopamine wasn't the villain. It was just doing its job, offering incentives. Whispering, that thing over there will feel good. Go get it. The problem wasn't dopamine. The problem was what I was feeding it. See, we've all become dopamine dealers to ourselves. Every time we open TikTok, every time we check email compulsively, every time we refresh that inbox knowing nothing new is coming, we're dosing our brains with just enough reward to keep us hooked, but not enough to move us forward. It's like snacking on marshmallows and wondering why you're still hungry. So one day, after realizing I had checked my email 17 times in a single hour and still hadn't replied to the one message I needed to, I decided I'd try something radical. Use dopamine to my advantage. But first, I had to understand it better. So I fell into the rabbit hole of neuropsychology and read something interesting, something no productivity YouTuber ever tells you. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's about anticipation. That blew my mind. The chemical rush doesn't come from the thing itself, it comes from expecting the thing. That's why the idea of starting a new project feels amazing, but day 3 of working on it feels like watching paint dry on your soul. It also explains why scrolling endlessly through content feels productive. Your brain is constantly chasing that next hit of novelty, that next interesting thing. It's the chase, not the catch. So if I could shift the anticipation from a cheap dopamine source, say, memes, to a meaningful task, I could technically hijack my own reward system. And I did. First, I changed how I talked about work in my head. I stopped saying, "Ugh, I have to finish this task," and started saying, "Let's see if I can make this interesting for 10 minutes. That small reframe, an experiment instead of an obligation, tricked my brain. Suddenly, there was curiosity involved. Intrigue. Dopamine. The task hadn't changed. But my relationship to it had. Here's a human intelligence fact. The brain releases more dopamine when a reward is unexpected or novel. That's why new hobbies are thrilling for 5 minutes and then gather dust once the novelty wears off. To keep the novelty going, I broke big tasks into smaller ones. Not because it made the work easier, because it made the wins faster. I designed my work sessions like mini video games. Each 10-minute block was a level. Finish a block? Get a point. 5 points equals reward. Sometimes the reward was a cookie. Sometimes it was a break. Once, embarrassingly, it was just getting to watch a dog video guilt-free. It worked. There's a phrase in academic psychology called reward substitution. When your brain can't feel motivated by a distant goal, it responds better to a closer, more tangible one. It's why write a book is paralyzing, but write 200 words and then get ice cream is weirdly effective. So I applied this everywhere. Emails? 1 point. Laundry? 2 points. Writing a boring report? 5 points and a YouTube break. You know what started to happen? I wanted to start tasks. Not because I loved the work, but because the little thrill of progress, of moving up the invisible scoreboard, felt good. So I started tricking myself with fake cheeses, mini milestones, midway rewards, a checkmark that meant nothing to anyone but me, and everything to my distracted brain. You'd be amazed what your inner procrastinator will do for a gold star sticker. I'm not even kidding. I bought a pack. This strategy changed the game. Now, when I feel resistance, I don't ask myself, "Why don't I want to do this?" I ask, "What would make my brain want this?" That's not weakness. That's smart design. Academic debate time. Some scholars argue that relying on dopamine reinforcement can become a crutch, making people dependent on external stimuli. Others believe it's simply how the brain learns new behavior patterns and that intentionally engineering motivation systems is adaptive. So here's my conclusion. If the brain naturally chases rewards, why not feed it something more meaningful? Don't resist the system, refine it. Train it to seek what truly matters. I don't shame myself for needing incentive. I designed for it. Now when I write, I light a candle, put on a very specific playlist, the same every time. It cues anticipation, and open a Word doc titled Level 1. Yes, I really named it that. Yes, I'm a little embarrassed. But it works. Because dopamine isn't the enemy. Distraction isn't the villain. The lack of strategy is. So if you're still blaming your phone, your attention span, or your lack of willpower, pause and ask yourself, what if you stopped fighting your brain and started bribing it? Hey, don't look at me like that. I'm just saying, dogs get treats. Kids get gold stars. Why not you? You ever walk into a room and completely forget why you're there? Like you enter with purpose and then, poof, your brain hits a blank wall and suddenly you're just standing in the kitchen staring at a banana like it's going to tell you your destiny? That's not just forgetfulness. That's a little peek at the invisible script running your life. I started noticing mine during the quiet parts of the day, those in-between moments when I wasn't distracted, but I wasn't doing anything important either. I'd catch myself walking in circles, checking apps I didn't care about, rereading the same sentence 5 times. Not because I was tired, but because something was pulling me away from focus. And it wasn't the work. It was something beneath the work. See, every one of us runs on scripts. Little silent narratives that guide our behavior whether we realize it or not. You're not good with deadlines. You always get distracted. You're the kind of person who needs pressure. These aren't just thoughts. They're identity cues that shape what we believe we're capable of. The problem is, most of them are leftovers. Stuff picked up from school, childhood, past jobs, random comments from people who didn't even know us that well. And they become truths simply because we've never questioned them out loud. One day, I opened a notebook and wrote, "What are the stories I keep telling myself that make me sabotage my own progress?" I didn't expect much. But wow, did the floodgates open. Here's a sampling from that first list. If I can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing. I'm too inconsistent to follow through. I'll feel more like it tomorrow. None of those things were objectively true. But they'd become my internal GPS. And guess what? The brain loves confirmation. There's a thing called confirmation bias. You've probably heard of it. It's the tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms what we already believe. So if you believe you're bad at focusing, your brain will highlight every time you fail to concentrate, and ignore the times you actually do. It's not self-sabotage. It's just a broken script. A program looping in the background. Human intelligence fact? According to research, up to 95% of our behavior is driven by unconscious patterns. That means most of your day is not controlled by conscious decision, but by mental habits formed years ago, many of which are outdated or just plain unhelpful. Once I saw that, I made it my mission to rewrite the script. Not through mantras or positive affirmations, no shade to those, but through evidence collection. If my brain needed proof, I'd give it some. Here's what I started doing. Every time I resisted a task, I'd ask, "What invisible rule am I following right now?" Was it, "I need to be in the mood"? Was it, "I'm already behind, so why try"? Was it, "I can't focus unless everything else is done"? And then I'd challenge it. Sometimes by writing it down. Sometimes by doing the exact opposite. Sometimes by just whispering, "That's not true anymore." One particularly weird day, I started writing in the third person. "He doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to begin." Yeah. I self-narrated my work session like a BBC Nature documentary. But strangely, it helped. I was breaking the loop by creating a new one where I wasn't the unreliable narrator of my own failures, but a protagonist figuring it out in real time. Now, I'm not saying changing your verbs will erase procrastination, but changing how you talk about time and effort? That can absolutely reshape your behavior. I stopped saying, "I always mess this up," and started saying, "In the past, I've struggled with this, but today might be different." It sounds small. It is small. But small is all the brain needs sometimes to loosen its grip on a lie. There's still academic debate over whether language shapes thought or simply reflects it. See, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. But personally, the moment I changed how I narrated my choices started changing. I also began re-engineering my environment to interrupt the bad scripts. I moved my phone across the room. I started work in a different browser profile, one without distracting tabs. I used visual cues, like sticky notes that didn't say, "Do this," but said, "You've done harder things before." You wouldn't think a sentence like that could matter. But it does. Because the invisible scripts aren't just in your head, they're in your environment, too. Your spaces, your habits, your tiny rituals. I call it friction flipping. Make the bad habits harder. Make the good ones easier. Remove the cue that triggers avoidance. Add the cue that invites motion. Before, my desk said, "Procrastinate here." Now it says, "Hey, we write for 5 minutes, then we goof off." Deal? Your environment should act like a helpful sidekick, not a trickster goblin. And here's the thing most people miss. Rewriting your internal script is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the parts of yourself that already know how to do hard things. Because you do. You've shown up before. You've pushed through. You've surprised yourself. You're just out of practice. So take the pressure off. Start small. Rewrite one line. Instead of, "I'm lazy," try, "I'm learning how to move through resistance." Instead of, "I can't focus," try, I'm focusing for 3 minutes starting now. Tiny edits. Big shifts. The story doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. It started with one rule. Not a grand manifesto. Not a 17-point morning routine involving lemon water and sun salutations. Just one quietly stubborn little rule. If it takes less than 2 minutes, I do it now. I stole it from somewhere, I'm sure. Probably a productivity book I skimmed while procrastinating on actual work. But unlike most advice that passed through my brain like a breeze through a screen door, this one stuck. And it stuck because it was stupidly doable. One day I tested it. There was a dish in the sink. A single spoon mocking me. Normally, I'd let it sit there until it evolved into a life form or became part of some vague plan to do all the dishes later. But I remembered the rule. Less than 2 minutes? Fine. I rinsed it. Dried it. Done. It was such a dumb one that I laughed. But here's the thing, I felt different. There was this tiny ping of accomplishment in my chest. Not pride. More like relief. Like my brain whispered, "Oh, maybe we're not a total wreck after all." That was the first time I felt the tug of momentum again. So I leaned in. The next day, I applied the rule to email. There were 4 unanswered messages just hanging out in my inbox like guilt gremlins. One was just a "thanks." That didn't need a reply, but I had kept it unread like a passive-aggressive badge of busyness. I opened it. Archived it. Ping. Another one needed a 1-sentence reply. Did it. Sent. Ping. Each tiny action created a microdose of clarity. The fog lifted, not all at once, but in gentle little shimmers. Did you know your brain is wired to seek closure? It's called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks linger in your mind, creating mental friction. Even completing a small task can clear up valuable focus and restore clarity. That's what the rule did. It wasn't about dishes or emails. It was about proving to myself, over and over, I can take action. Because that was the root wound I'd been nursing for years, the belief that I was someone who didn't follow through. And guess what heals that? Following through. Even when it's small. Especially when it's small. But I didn't stop there. I crafted another rule. 5 minutes of work is still work. This one broke my perfectionism. Before, if I didn't have an hour or the right vibe, I'd do nothing. Now, 5 minutes was a win. I set a timer. Typed for 5 minutes. Stopped. It didn't matter what I wrote. It just mattered that I moved the needle. It's about building security through small actions. I felt that. Each 5-minute sprint was a nut in the ground. Some I'd find again. Some I wouldn't. But all of them made me feel less panicked when winter came. Academic debate alert. There's an ongoing question in behavioral science about whether habits form best through repetition or emotional reward. Is it the doing, or the feeling after the doing, that locks behavior into place? I say both. But especially the latter. That's why I made my third rule. Celebrate the start, not the finish. We're taught to applaud the big wins. The launch. The completion. The viral post. But those things are rare and distant. I needed motivation that lived close. I needed to feel proud when I opened the doc, not just when I published something. So I did this silly thing. Every time I started a hard task, I'd fist pump. Quietly if someone was around. Loudly if I was alone. Sometimes I'd say, "Boom! Look at you go!" Like a sleep-deprived personal trainer in my own brain. It worked. Why? Because emotion cements behavior. The brain remembers what feels good. So I made starting feel good. You might be wondering how all of this relates to beating deep, soul-level procrastination. And honestly, it's everything. Because procrastination isn't just the avoidance of tasks. It's the avoidance of discomfort. Of disappointment. Of not being the person you thought you'd be. But when you build rules that work even when you're tired, grumpy, or over it, you start breaking that avoidance cycle. And here's the best part. Those rules don't have to make sense to anyone else. Some of mine were downright weird. I wasn't allowed to sit down until I'd written one sentence standing up. I could only use my fancy playlist if I was working. I could watch dumb videos, but only after 5 minutes of typing with my eyes closed. It didn't matter what the rule was. It only mattered that it felt small, funny, and mine. I remember once trying to write an article. I was stuck. Tired. Ready to crawl under the desk. So I pulled out a notepad, drew a tiny box, and labeled it. Success equals one word. I wrote one word. Then another. Then a sentence. It's always the first inch that feels impossible. But once you break that resistance, the rest comes pouring out like soup from a can with a cracked seal. This isn't about hacking your way to productivity utopia. It's about reclaiming agency when your brain insists you have none. And yeah, sometimes I break my own rules. Sometimes I lie face down on the floor and mutter, "I'm a potato." But I always come back to one truth. Action is easier to take when the first step feels laughably small. So I made my rules that way. I still have them. Scribbled on a post-it near my desk. 1. If it takes 2 minutes, do it now. 2. 5 minutes counts. 3. Celebrate the start. 4. Finish lines are fake. 5. Potatoes still get stuff done. That last one? Very personal. Very real. Because this isn't about becoming a productivity robot. It's about building a rhythm so gentle, so forgiving, so hilariously doable, that even on your worst days, you can still move forward. I used to think 5 minutes was useless. Like, what can you even do in 5 minutes? Heat up leftovers. Scroll through 4 memes. Talk yourself out of a workout. Real life takes longer, right? Deep work takes hours, right? Wrong. I discovered the 5-minute miracle by accident, while avoiding something else, naturally. It was late. I was tired. That familiar fog had crept in, the kind that makes you forget your middle name and question the purpose of socks. My to-do list was looking at me like, "Really? Still nothing?" So, out of spite more than motivation, I set a timer for 5 minutes and told myself, "Just write 1 paragraph. That's it. Then you can quit." What happened next surprised me. I didn't stop at 5. In fact, once I started, I hit 10, then 15, then 45. The timer had long since gone off, but I had fallen into flow. That magical zone where time collapses and suddenly you're 6 tabs in, doing actual research like some productivity warlock. That's when I realized starting is the hard part. Not the doing. The starting. This phenomenon has a name, inertia. Not just a physics thing. It's mental too. Objects in motion stay in motion. But more importantly, objects at rest stay at rest, until acted upon by a timer and a deep sense of existential dread. I began testing this more often. I'd trick myself by saying, "Just 5 minutes." And somehow, some weird cognitive distortion, some emotional momentum, that first tiny motion cracked open a portal. And no, it didn't always turn into magic. Sometimes I did just 5. But even then, 5 minutes is more than 0. 5 minutes is proof. Studies in behavioral psychology show that once someone commits even a tiny effort toward a goal, they're far more likely to continue. This is called the commitment consistency principle. The brain doesn't like contradiction. If you start, it wants to keep aligning with that identity. I started applying this to everything. Just 5 minutes of stretching became a full yoga flow. Just wash 1 plate became a clean kitchen. Just sketch the first slide became a finished pitch deck. It was like I'd found the back door to my own motivation. Odd fact of the day, there's a sport called extreme ironing, where people take ironing boards to remote or dangerous locations and press clothes, for fun. Mountains, skydiving, even underwater. Proof that humans can find purpose in anything, as long as there's structure and novelty. My 5-minute rule wasn't extreme ironing, but it had the same principle: put structure around absurdity, and the brain will play along. I made the rule even gentler. 5 minutes of anything counts. 5 minutes of journaling? Win. 5 minutes of brainstorming? Win. 5 minutes of sitting with a blank dock and breathing slowly? Yes. Still counts. Because what I learned wasn't just that motion created momentum. It was that showing up shrinks the monster. Before starting, the task is a skyscraper. Looming. Intimidating. Definitely haunted. After 5 minutes? It's just a to-do. Slightly annoying. But beatable. There's still academic debate about whether microtasking improves long-term productivity or just gives a temporary confidence boost. But from where I'm sitting, in sweatpants, with 300 words already written, it's enough. I also realized something else. 5 minutes is just long enough to prove to yourself you're capable. Interrupt the procrastination cycle. Shift your identity from avoider to doer. And that shift? It echoes throughout your day. Some mornings, I'd do a 5-minute task and feel a surge of clarity like I'd just deep cleaned my brain. Other times, I'd ride the high into a 2-hour work sprint. But either way, I was moving again. And motion, no matter how small, is the enemy of procrastination. I built rituals around it. I made a 5-minute playlist, full of tracks that lasted just long enough to carry me through. I'd say, hit play, do something, stop when the music ends. It felt like a game. A dare. A low-stakes challenge I could win even with one eye open and toast crumbs on my hoodie. Even better? I stopped fearing the big things. Because if I could start, I knew I could finish. Not today, maybe. But eventually. That's all 5 minutes needs to be, a bridge between stillness and effort. And you know what else? 5 minutes makes failure safer. If I tried something and it didn't work? Whatever. It was 5 minutes. No shame. No catastrophic identity collapse. Just an experiment. Tomorrow's another go. You can't really mess up 5 minutes. It's too short to be scary. So if you're stuck right now, if the task feels too big, too murky, too loud, pause. Take a breath. Set a timer. Do 5 minutes. Write one sentence. Organize one folder. Breathe slowly and visualize yourself doing it tomorrow, and then do one small thing now. Let the miracle happen. Because it will. It always starts the same way. A breath. A nudge. A whisper. Just 5 minutes. I used to think calendars were tools of oppression. You know the kind, those meticulously organized planners that make you feel both like a failure and a time management enthusiast at the same time. I'd buy them, fill them out with the most optimistic intentions, and then forget about them. By February, they were buried under a pile of receipts and pizza menus, gathering dust like that one gym membership I always forget to cancel. I had a complicated relationship with time. I felt like it was always slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't quite catch up. Every week felt like a sprint, and every day was a race against the invisible clock that ticked louder as deadlines loomed. But then, a funny thing happened. I got tired of the constant panic. I got tired of feeling like time was always the enemy, and I decided to try something radical: make friends with my calendar. I'll be honest, it took me a while. I wasn't immediately sold on the idea of planning my day to the minute. In fact, it made me feel claustrophobic just thinking about it. The idea of scheduling in my free time felt like shackles. But that's when I realized, calendars don't control you. You control them. So I did the unthinkable. I gave my calendar permission to be imperfect. I started small. Instead of planning out every minute, because, let's face it, I wasn't that type of person, I marked off the essentials. And I didn't just put work and meetings on there. I also put fun things. Read a chapter of the book. Watch one episode of a show. Go for a walk. And here's where the magic happened. When I put things on my calendar that I enjoyed, it stopped feeling like a prison and more like a roadmap to balance. One day, I set aside 30 minutes to write, and I scheduled it like it was an appointment. I didn't put write book proposal or finished draft. I put Write whatever you feel like for 30 minutes. And guess what? It wasn't a flawless writing session. But it was the first time in a while that I felt like I was giving myself permission to fail while doing something productive. Sometimes I hit those 30 minutes and wrote 5 sentences. Other times, it was 5 pages. But because I had scheduled it, I showed up. Human intelligence fact: the act of scheduling your time actually increases commitment to completing tasks. This is because you create a visual representation of your intentions, which helps overcome procrastination by making the commitment tangible. What I didn't realize was that my brain was fighting the calendar because I was overscheduling unrealistic expectations. I didn't need every day to be packed. I didn't need every block to have a purpose. I needed flexibility, boundaries, and room to breathe. And that was the key to making my calendar work for me. I learned to prioritize rest. I began scheduling rest just like I scheduled work. I marked out time for doing nothing, for taking walks, for reading a few chapters without looking at the clock. It wasn't wasted time. It was recharging time. I even started adding a note to every task block. Feel free to make it as easy as possible. This sounds simple, but it completely changed my relationship with time. Rather than looking at my calendar as a to-do list of endless demands, I began to see it as a toolkit for choosing what I wanted to invest my energy in. I find that some research suggests that making time for boredom is essential for creativity. It's that precious space where your brain can wander, make connections, and let ideas percolate. So now, I literally schedule 10 minutes of nothing time between tasks, and it's like I'm giving my brain a mini vacation. Honestly, I feel like a genius sometimes. Now I can look at my calendar with a sense of peace instead of panic. My brain no longer rebels against it because it knows there's room for both the hard stuff and the fun stuff. It's not about perfection, it's about making progress. Academic debate alert: some people argue that rigid scheduling stifles creativity and spontaneity. Others believe it's the only way to effectively manage your time in a world full of distractions. I lean toward the latter. Planning gives me freedom because it gives me choice. My rule of thumb now? Plan the day, but leave room for grace. The best part is that it has helped me focus without overwhelming myself. I don't feel that frantic need to squeeze everything into one day anymore. I give myself permission to let some tasks spill over into tomorrow. It's not a defeat, it's an acknowledgement that time is fluid and sometimes it takes more than one try to finish something. One of my new favorite habits is taking 10 minutes every evening to reflect and plan for the next day. Not as an overwhelming checklist, but as an opportunity to align my intentions with my energy. It's a mini meditation, a moment of pause. I jot down a few key priorities, then make sure there's enough room for things I enjoy. Here's a new perspective for you: rest is an investment in productivity, not a reward for completing tasks. When you build your schedule with this in mind, you'll find that you work smarter, not harder. The more I leaned into the calendar, the more I realized that time is mine to control, and that includes not just work, but play, rest, and everything in between. No more scrambling. No more guilt. Just intention and a little bit of grace. One thing I didn't expect when I started trying to beat procrastination was that I would end up questioning everything I thought I knew about motivation. I always assumed motivation was like a light switch, one flick, and suddenly you're firing on all cylinders, ready to tackle anything that comes your way. I imagined the perfect blend of caffeine, inspiration, and sheer willpower would transform me into a productivity superhero. I'd be flying through my to-do list, saving the world, all while sipping a green smoothie and never blinking. But that's not how it works. You know what I learned instead? Motivation is actually the result of action, not the cause. Think about it. If you wait for the right mood, the perfect burst of energy, or that aha moment of inspiration, you're going to wait forever. Motivation isn't something you catch like a cold. It's something you build through small, deliberate actions. Want motivation? Move first. Action flips the switch. Start small, start messy, but start. Emotion follows motion, always. That's the secret. If you wait for motivation to kick in before you start, you'll always be stuck in the tomorrow trap. But if you just start anyway, even when you don't feel like it, you'll create your own motivation. The brain rewards effort-based progress, not just success. This means that even the smallest step in the right direction triggers dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. This feedback loop creates a feeling of accomplishment, which fuels more action. That's why breaking big tasks into tiny chunks can make all the difference. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy. Some days, you're still going to feel like a couch potato with a giant task list. Some days, your brain will tell you, "Nah, not today." And that's fine. But what I do now is recognize the resistance without letting it stop me. This is where I really started to notice the power of accepting imperfection. A major cause of procrastination is the fear of not doing something well enough, or perfectly. I'd often find myself putting things off because I thought, "It's not going to be good enough, so why even try?" I realized that was just another excuse. Perfection is a moving target. And that's something I had to come to terms with. Done is better than perfect. Once I embraced that, everything shifted. Instead of aiming for flawless results, I aimed for progress. It wasn't about how perfectly the task was done. It was about the fact that I had done it, regardless of how it turned out. This made me rethink how I approached tasks. I stopped expecting every moment of work to be productive or every sentence to be polished. Instead, I focused on just starting. And when I made progress, no matter how small, I celebrated it. Progress is progress, even if it's not perfect. That's a lesson I learned the hard way. Some days, I'd look at the work I'd done and think, "This isn't enough." But I'd remind myself, "It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be done." I also started seeing failure differently. Instead of seeing it as something to avoid, I began viewing it as a learning opportunity. You know what? I wanted to fail, because every failure taught me something new, nudged me forward, and took me one step closer to success. I started celebrating those tiny failures. The incomplete drafts. The missteps. The moments when I got stuck but kept going anyway. Those failures were progress too. The most important realization? Perfection is a lie. We never arrive at perfection. We just keep evolving. It's about progress, not about getting everything right. I made peace with the fact that my best work will come not when I'm at my most perfect, or when all the stars align, but when I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that's the trick I use now. I trust the process. I trust that as long as I keep moving, even at a snail's pace, I'll eventually get to where I want to go. Maybe not today. Maybe not this week. But eventually, yes. There's an old saying. Success is the sum of small efforts, repeated day in and day out. It's true. Success isn't a single moment. It's a collection of tiny actions stacked on top of each other. It's the moments where you start something, finish something, and even fail at something. All of it counts. Here's my challenge to you. The next time you feel the urge to procrastinate, don't fight it. Don't try to force motivation. Instead, take one small action. Maybe it's just opening the file. Maybe it's typing one sentence. Maybe it's just walking into the gym. Start with that small action. Just like the first drop of rain before a storm, it's that first step that can make all the difference. Because in the end, the key isn't motivation, it's momentum. And that starts with action. It's funny how much we take motivation for granted until it's gone. When you're cruising through life, ticking off tasks left and right, there's this subtle sense of invincibility. Like you could take on anything, show up, do the work, and everything just falls into place. But the moment motivation decides to take a vacation, it's like the universe flips a switch, and suddenly, everything you once could do feels impossible. I hit a wall, a solid brick one, about 6 months ago. I didn't realize it at first. I thought I was just tired. After all, life gets hectic, right? But after a few weeks of pushing through and getting nothing done, I started questioning myself. It wasn't that I didn't want to work, I just couldn't make myself. The ideas were there, the intentions were there, but the drive? Gone. I took a step back. Instead of pressuring myself into feeling productive, I focused on what was actually working in my life. What was already moving? What was already going well, even in the smallest ways? I didn't see this as a motivational pep talk or a "you can do this" mantra. I realized that everything doesn't need to be done in the same way. And if one method of working wasn't clicking, maybe it was time to try something else. I went back to my old friend, the 5-minute rule. But this time, I was kinder about it. The pressure to accomplish something big, something life-changing, was off. It wasn't about productivity anymore. It was about showing up, just enough. The irony? That's when things started to click again. Because here's the thing, when you're in a slump, the last thing you need is more pressure. The world already throws that at you from every angle. What you need is permission to just be. To fail, without guilt. To move in small ways, without expecting big leaps. I found this out while working on a task I'd been avoiding for ages. A project I couldn't even bring myself to look at without sighing. So I set my timer for 5 minutes. Just 5. And I did the smallest possible thing. I clicked on the document. And that was it. But it broke the ice. Then I typed one sentence. Just one. And when the timer went off, I walked away, having done something, no matter how small. That was all. And in that moment, it felt good enough. It was progress. What I didn't realize at the time was that I was tapping into the power of ease. I wasn't forcing myself to be productive. I was simply letting myself be and taking action without the weight of perfection. I let go of the belief that everything needed to be exceptional, and instead, I gave myself permission to be just okay. By releasing that tight grip on needing to do everything perfectly, I started seeing my productivity as a journey, not a destination. Sure, some days I still had to push through the heavy resistance. But I found that it became easier to move forward when I let go of the myth that every single day needed to be groundbreaking. This was the real shift. Stop chasing motivation. Start embracing motion. When you can build momentum from small actions, actions that feel manageable and free of pressure, the bigger tasks don't seem as daunting. They seem possible. At first, I was afraid of doing things imperfectly. I thought if I didn't go all in, I'd never get anywhere. But then I realized, the perfectionist mindset isn't a gift, it's a trap. It tells you that unless something is perfect, it's worthless. But the truth is, it's the imperfect actions that bring about the real growth. And that's where I found real power. Progress is messy. It's filled with mistakes, delays, detours, and wrong turns. But every step forward counts. Sometimes, the hardest part isn't the task itself. It's accepting that you don't have to be perfect to start. You just need to begin. And that beginning doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be small. It can be messy. But it's still progress. I'd like to think I'm no longer a slave to motivation. I don't wait for it anymore. I just create it with action. Even when it's 5 minutes of action. Even when I'm tired, distracted, or uninspired. Even when it feels like nothing will come of it. Because something always does. You just have to trust the process. And here's the ultimate freedom. There is no perfect process. There's just the one that works for you at any given moment. You don't need to follow anyone's blueprint for success. You need to create your own. So today, if you're stuck in a rut, don't worry about the big picture. Don't think about your grand goals or your impossible standards. Just take the smallest step. Do it with ease. Do it for yourself. And if you don't feel motivated after that, it's okay. Tomorrow you'll try again. But for now, let's keep moving forward, one tiny step at a time. There's something deeply satisfying about proving yourself wrong. That's what I realized as I sat in front of a task I had convinced myself I couldn't do. I'd been staring at this one project for weeks, each day feeling heavier than the last, until it had become this mountain of dread. The more I avoided it, the bigger it grew. It seemed impossible. My brain kept telling me, "You can't do this. You'll fail. Just give up now." And for a while I listened. I procrastinated. I kept thinking, I'll get to it tomorrow, while doing everything but that task. But eventually, I got tired of avoiding it. It wasn't a moment of clarity or motivation. It wasn't the sudden epiphany where everything clicks. No, I just reached a point where I was sick of the guilt. I was tired of feeling like I was running from something rather than facing it head on. So, I did the one thing that scared me the most. I showed up. No grand expectations. No pressure to be perfect. I didn't even put a timer on or set a big goal. I just opened the document and started typing. At first, it was garbage. A bunch of sentences that didn't make sense. But it didn't matter. The important thing was I was there. And you know what? After about 20 minutes, I stopped hating it. I didn't finish the project that day. Heck, I didn't even get halfway through. But by the end of the session, I had chipped away at it. I had proven to myself that the hardest part of the task wasn't the work itself. The hardest part was just showing up, just getting my brain to believe that I could do it. That's when I realized procrastination is often just a fear of starting. It's not about being lazy or incapable. It's about the terror of facing something that seems insurmountable. But when you break it down, when you take that first step, just begin, the mountain doesn't look so tall anymore. The human intelligence fact here is that cognitive dissonance plays a big role in procrastination. When you think about a task but avoid it, you create a tension between your intention and your action. This tension makes you feel uncomfortable, which is why you avoid the task even more. But when you just start, even if it's imperfect, the dissonance fades, and you feel a sense of alignment. Oddly enough, you don't need to be perfect to win against procrastination. You just need to start. I started applying this lesson everywhere. Small things. Big things. It didn't matter. The process was the same: show up. Start. Move forward. Here's the tricky part though: this works, but only when you stop waiting for motivation to strike. It's easy to tell yourself that you'll be more motivated later, that you'll feel like doing the work tomorrow, when the stars align and everything is perfect. But you know what? Tomorrow never comes. And that's the trap. The secret to overcoming procrastination isn't about waiting for the perfect conditions. It's about making a commitment to yourself, right here, right now. It's saying, I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need to start. Once I embraced this, I found that motivation often followed. Sometimes it wasn't immediate, but it came. Because when you create a habit of showing up, just a little bit, every day, the momentum starts to build. And once you've tasted the smallest success, you want more of it. That's how you break the cycle of procrastination. Academic debate time. Some researchers argue that willpower is finite, meaning it runs out the more you use it. Others believe that habit and routine can bypass the limits of willpower. Personally, I believe it's a combination of both. Willpower gets you started, but habits keep you going. And that's what's crucial to remember. Start with small, manageable actions, and let the habit carry you forward. I also realized that I didn't need to be productive all the time. That was the other lie I'd been feeding myself. The idea that I needed to be on all the time or else I wasn't good enough. But I found that productivity without rest is just as damaging as procrastination. Both leave you exhausted, unfulfilled, and unmotivated. So, I started integrating rest into my day just as much as I did work. I gave myself permission to step away. And you know what? When I returned, I felt more energized, more creative, and more focused. Rest is part of the process too. You can't be on 100% of the time. Balance is key. Now, when I feel the procrastination creeping in, I don't panic. I don't beat myself up. I just acknowledge it and ask myself, what's the next tiny thing I can do? And I start there. It might be just opening an email, or writing a paragraph, or walking for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter how small. What matters is that I begin. Here's my challenge for you: the next time you feel overwhelmed, or procrastination creeps in, don't run from it. Don't fight it. Just start. Even if it's just for 5 minutes. Because once you start, you'll be amazed at how much momentum you can build. Remember, motion creates emotion. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. And just like that, you've broken the procrastination cycle. If there's one thing I've learned in the battle against procrastination, it's that the key isn't just about doing, it's about reprogramming your brain to think differently. The reason most of us procrastinate isn't that we don't know how to do something. It's because we're wired to avoid discomfort. And when a task feels overwhelming or unpleasant, our brain will do anything it can to steer us away from it. So, we distract ourselves with the latest app, another episode on Netflix, or just scrolling through social media, anything to avoid that internal discomfort. But here's the truth, you can't escape discomfort. Not forever anyway. You can try to run from it, but it'll always catch up with you. And what I realized, through trial and error, and a lot of wasted time, is that the best way to break the procrastination habit is to learn how to sit with that discomfort instead of running from it. At first, this felt impossible. I mean, who willingly invites discomfort? Who wants to sit in the feeling of, ugh, I don't want to do this, especially when it's tied to something that's challenging or important? I certainly didn't. But that's exactly what I had to do. I had to start making peace with discomfort. Now, before you think I'm about to give you some Zen-like, just breathe and let it go advice, let me tell you, this isn't about ignoring the discomfort or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about acknowledging it, sitting with it, and moving through it. You see, discomfort is a natural part of the process. The anxiety you feel before starting a task? It's just your brain trying to protect you. The feeling of dread when you think about all the work ahead? That's normal. It's what happens when we're faced with something challenging. That discomfort doesn't have to control you. It's possible to act despite the discomfort. In fact, research in neuroscience shows that the brain's emotional responses to tasks, especially the fear of failure, or the anxiety of not being good enough, can actually be retrained. Just like building muscle, you can build tolerance to discomfort, but only if you keep showing up, even when you don't feel like it. So, I started doing something small but powerful. Every time I felt that creeping discomfort, I acknowledged it. I didn't try to fight it. I didn't try to talk myself out of it. I simply said, I feel uncomfortable right now. This is normal. Then I moved forward anyway. And here's the fascinating part. Once I stopped trying to escape the discomfort, it lost its power. The more I showed up to the task, the more I learned that the worst part wasn't the work itself. It was the anticipation. The fear. The thought that I was about to fail. By making it okay to feel uncomfortable, I took away its power. The anxiety didn't disappear, but it no longer dictated whether I would act or not. I realized that feeling uncomfortable didn't mean I couldn't move forward. It meant I was doing something important. I wasn't ignoring the discomfort. I was building tolerance to it. I was teaching myself that discomfort wasn't something to fear, it was something to move through. In some cultures, people engage in deliberate discomfort practices, like cold water immersion or fasting, not as a punishment, but as a way to train their resilience. The idea is that by repeatedly exposing yourself to discomfort in controlled situations, you strengthen your ability to handle stress in everyday life. I started doing the same thing with my tasks. I didn't aim to make them easy. I didn't try to eliminate the discomfort. I just learned to keep moving forward despite it. Once I embraced this, my procrastination lessened. It wasn't perfect. Some days were still tough. But the difference was that I didn't make excuses anymore. I didn't wait for the perfect moment to feel motivated. I didn't expect all my fears to disappear before I started. I simply started anyway. It was a game changer. You know what else helped? Reframing failure. Instead of seeing failure as the end of the road, I started seeing it as just part of the journey. Every time I failed, and trust me, there were plenty of failures, I reminded myself, failure doesn't mean I can't do this, it means I'm learning. It became less of a roadblock and more of a stepping stone. This change in mindset took a while, but when I finally internalized it, procrastination became less of a monster. Instead, it was just a normal, temporary feeling that I could push through, just like any other discomfort. The big takeaway from all of this? You don't need to wait for motivation to act. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need to wait for the right mood. You just need to start. And when discomfort shows up, you greet it. You don't run from it. You don't let it control you. You move forward despite it. That's the power of building resilience. And that's how procrastination stops being a problem. Not by eliminating discomfort, but by learning how to move through it.